Hey everybody, today I'm talking about The Lost Ruins of Arnak, which is a 2020 release board game designed by Min and Elwin. This one is published by Czech Games Edition and accommodates 1 to 4 players. The time frame of this game is generally about an hour to an hour and a half. Now, this game, as you can probably tell by the artwork, is kind of this setting of exploration. Think Indiana Jones, searching through lost lands and temples and forgotten artifacts, that kind of thing, and researching them. But the two core mechanisms in this game are deck building and worker placement. So you've got this really attractive looking board here with the kind of card row that you can draft from here. You've got the kind of side research track here, which can be quite a potent way of getting points. You've got your area for your resources, you've got your tablets here, you've got your arrowheads, you've your rubies and your compasses and coins. And you've got other things as well that can pop up on the board to create new worker placement spots. You've also got the ability to get some of these almost assistants to help you do little bonus actions. And as you can see, there's a kind of starting region on the board which dictates the basic actions you can take. So, for example, you could put a worker here, get 2 coins, get 2 compasses, 2 tablets, arrowhead, that kind of thing. But as you can see from all these spots, and potential spots here, because there is room to grow into by spending these compasses, so like you're exploring new land, which is quite thematic. But you can see that these spaces have a kind of travel symbol on. That can be boots, it can be cars, it can be boats, or it can even be planes. And the idea is that planes can go anywhere, boats and cars can count for boots, and boots just count for boots. So it's kind of got a hierarchy of different travel icons that you'll need. Now, naturally, with all deck building games, you're going to have a starting deck of cards that looks like this. You've got your 4 basic cards you start with, which are just your compasses and your coins, and you've got these fear cards as well. Now, these fear cards are not only dud cards, because they don't really do much apart from letting you travel, but they also make you suffer a negative 1 point for every one you have in your deck at the end of the game. But these cards aren't just single use. As you can see here, in the top left-hand corner, you've got a travel symbol here. So what that means is that when you choose to deploy one of your workers, so say I wanted to go here, I would have to basically discard or play into my playing area one of these cards with the matching symbol. So you've got to bear that in mind, that in order to travel, you're likely going to have to sacrifice the main ability on the card itself. So naturally, with all deck building games, you can take an action in order to get new cards, and these new cards kind of cost money and will get you points at the end of the game and will let you do all kind of weird and wonderful things in order to get combos and do more actions with each turn you get. You've also got these slightly variable cards here called artifacts. Now, these are slightly more powerful and they cost compasses instead, and these work a bit differently, because when you gather one of these normal cards, they just go at the bottom of your deck ready to be drawn in the future. But these ones are able to be used straight away for, as I said, quite a powerful ability. But also, when you end up drawing them again in future turns, you have to spend one of these tablets in order to trigger that effect one more time. So you've got a bit of a currency in order to keep in mind, in order to keep activating those cards. So, as I said, with deck building games, you're just trying to get your deck going, and in order to get more abilities as you go on. Now, worker placement wise, as I said, you've got the basic actions here, but you've also got these more expensive regions. You've got the kind of mid-rift of the board here, which costs 3 compasses, and you've got the really kind of far off there part here that costs 6 compasses. Now, if you want to go to one of these spots, not only do you have to pay the travel icon by discarding one of those cards, but you'll also have to discard the number of compasses. And when you do that, you're going to draw a level building. So you've got the level 1 buildings and the level 2 buildings, depending on how far you've travelled. And you are going to grab one of those buildings and put it on the spot that you've just taken, and you're going to get the reward associated with it. So the further you go, the more powerful abilities you're going to get. Now, as you can see here as well, that's with all of these during setup, there's these little artifacts or little whatever you call them on the board already, and you're going to get an instant ability by exploring new land, which can let you either discard a card, so you can get rid of one of your fear cards, you can upgrade one of your resources, you can gain tablets, you can do lots of different things. Now, additionally, whenever you explore a new region, you are going to draw one of these tiles, one of these guardian tiles, to guard the space that you've just gone on. Now, the idea of this is that not only are you going to have to pay an additional fee, so for example, you're going to have to discard another 2 boots and a compass, And if you do that, you are going to basically put this in your kind of scoring area for not only victory points, because they're all worth 5 victory points each, but also you can kind of trigger this ability when you want to for a bonus action. If you don't end up getting rid of one of those guardians and your worker is still deployed there, by the time it comes to the refresh phase, when you remove your worker, you're going to have to take an additional fear card from the stack and put it into your basically deck of cards, which is not necessarily a good thing. In fact, it's a bad thing. So that's going to be pretty much the flow of the game. You've got the worker placement aspect here. You've got the deck building aspect, which I'm not going to go into all the details of the cards. It does all your kind of traditional deck building kind of things that you'd expect, but it's quite nice that it's all self-contained. Now, on top of all that, you've got this sideboard here, which kind of is supposed to depict your understanding and knowledge of these different artifacts that you're discovering. So as you can see, you're going to start with a magnifying glass and a logbook. And the idea is that you're going to be cashing in resources in order to travel up this, or to kind of traverse up this track to get right to the top and ultimately try and get yourself quite a few victory points by being the first to do so, and even getting more than that if you choose to invest even more in it. Now, in order to travel up this table, you're going to have to get rid of a certain number of objects. So, for example, I could get rid of a ruby and travel up to this spot here. Now, whenever I go to a new spot, you're going to get a bonus. So here, I'd get a coin. And at the end of the game, depending on how far my logbook and magnifying glass are, I'm going to get a number of points, and it scales up quite nicely. And on top of that, you're going to get a nice few bonuses as well, such as gaining assistance, which let you do little bonus actions. You can gain new cards, or in terms of drawing new cards, you can upgrade your assistants because these are all double-sided and can give you more powerful effects if you upgrade them. You can choose to, you can even suffer negative points, such as getting more fear cards or rubies and so on. And as you can probably tell, the higher you got this board, the more fees you're going to have to pay. And on top of that, you've also got this kind of options that you can go down, because if I'm here, I can go here or here. But once I'm here, I have to go here. So you've got this kind of route, or a pre-planned route, that you can slightly diverge from if you really need to. Now, there's a slight twist to this where you can never move your logbook farther than your magnifying glass. So you've got to bear that in mind as well, but getting the logbook up is going to get you slightly better rewards. So that's quite a strong way of getting points, is by investing in the research track. Now, there are a few small additional rules on top of this, where if you gather these little artifact tokens, or whatever they're called, you can choose to sacrifice these pre-printed points on your board here. So you've got this 4 slot, 3 slot, 2 slot and 1 slot, by covering it up with your artifact token, which will basically sacrifice those points or jettison those points, so you're not going to get them at the end of the game. But if you do that as a bonus action, you're going to get a little reward, such as being able to convert gold into rubies, get an arrowhead, 2 tablets, and so on. So you've got a bit of flexibility there as well. Now, a lot of these actions are bonus actions, so they don't kind of constitute your whole turn, but most of them are your main action, and you keep taking turns until you've exhausted your actions and will end up passing, at which point the round track will move along this thing here. And as you can see, there's only 5 rounds in the game, where you'll start discarding cards and replenishing to the left of the staff here with artifacts, and this side with the standard cards. And that's going to play out until you've gone all 5 rounds, where all points will be tallied and the winner will be determined. So that's pretty much how the game's going to play. It's pretty snappy. It only takes, as I said, about an hour to play, about 2 players, which is really nice. But let's talk about how I feel about the game mechanisms and how it all works. Now, I will say that I'd heard quite a lot of good things about the Lost Ruins of Arnak. And generally speaking, as a kind of generally heavier Euro-style player, these are kind of light, medium weight, almost entry-level plus games rarely hit for me, because it kind of sits in that weird ground that I'm not looking for anymore. But I will say that I was quite impressed about the different levels and things you can do here, or different layers of gameplay here. And it's not really one of these paint-by-number games that a lot of these kind of weightings are attuned to. So that is something I did like. The level of deck building is simple, but at the same time, there is some quite satisfying combinations to trigger off. And I wasn't left feeling like it was just lackluster standard deck building. There was some really nice combinations and some satisfying gameplay there. So So in terms of meaningful decisions, you've got the good deck building here. You've got the idea of having to thin your fear cards out and knowing when to, being able to afford to take more of these fear cards. Obviously, the scarcity of these cards being available and having to grab them before your opponents do. Being able to grab the artifacts and bearing in mind how you're going to use your cards in the first place, because normally you want to use the abilities, especially as the game goes on, but you also want to be travelling to these worker placement spots in order to get more abilities that way. So yeah, there is quite a lot to weigh up in terms of meaningful decisions, and even in the order in the way you activate different abilities. The balance as well, I think it's generally pretty good. If you focus on different things, I think more often than not you're going to have to invest quite a significant amount of energy into this research track, because that seemed to be where a lot of the points came from in our games. But I think if you go for a real kind of monster slaying strategy, you can probably do well that way, and so on. So there's different ways to approach the game, and of course the game comes with quite a significant amount of cards where you can build your deck in different ways. The mechanism in the game, while it's two very simple mechanisms in terms of the very simple, straightforward worker placement, but with that additional twist of having to spend the cards to go there, with pretty basic deck building, they do come together really nicely, and it doesn't feel like it's just penned in and just botched together to try and make a combination or hybrid of mechanisms. It's actually pretty smooth and seamless the way those two pretty profound mechanisms come together, which is quite impressive. Time investment is something that left me really impressed. It does, what I said, while it's on that lighter end of the medium scale, it does fly by really quickly, especially those first few rounds. Initially you're halfway through the game and it's only taken about 20 minutes or so, but that kind of ties into one of my biggest kind of praises about this game, which is the sense of progression and the tempo of it. So you'll start the game off on round 1 and round 2 being able to do very few things. You start with the very basic options, and you'll just end up gathering a card or two, maybe slightly going up the track and activating a worker placement spot. And you think, you know what, by the end of the game, I'm not going to be able to do anything. I know I've got this massive long track here that I've got to get up to. It's round 3 and I'm only up to here. But you'll really find that by the time it gets to round 3, 4 and 5, your engine does start going quite strongly, and the turns become much more satisfying, and it ramps up loads, and you'll end up just triggering things in a way that gets you loads of mileage out of your turn, and you feel like you're achieving a lot, especially in relation to what you started with being able to do, which really was one of the main impressions that this game left on me. So I did really like that. Uptime as well is pretty quick. I mean, most of the actions are snappy and don't require too much thought. You can think about a lot of things during other players' turns. Of course, there's some player interaction in terms of being able to grab worker placement spots available and grab cards. But I think it's one of those games where you can plan accordingly and give yourself very viable and strong backups, even if your plan A doesn't quite go as you wanted it to. So yeah, turns are quick, and there isn't much scope for analysis paralysis, and there isn't much downtime. They're all very snappy actions. Aesthetically, I think the game looks wonderful. I really do like this, as I said, this Indiana Jones style feel, the colour palette, that kind of Lost World visual of it. I really do like that. I think it's probably a somewhat underused theme, considering how widely appealing it is. And I think this one just puts that layer of skin on really well. And the idea of travelling farther and stuff, and all the artwork in this game is magnificent, especially these guardians and things. I'll just show you a few of these. Yeah, I really do like the way these looks. You've got these scorpions and these big lizards and beetles and whatever that is. So there's some really, really great visuals here. All the card artwork's nice and clear. The wording is nicely done. The iconography is good, and yeah, I think it's done a really good job of its visual presentation. So I can't fault that at all. And the actual quality themselves of the components is top notch as well. Nice thick tiles. All the components and the arrowheads and the rubies, they're all good quality things, especially these little tablets. It just comes together really nicely and adds to the visual impact of the game. And that kind of ties into the theme really as well. I mean, it's not an amazingly thematic game, but what it does well. You've got all the adventure tropes here. Your crystal earrings, your monkey medallions. You've got your backpacks and your airdrops and brushes and all these things that you'd expect to see from an Indiana Jones film are in this game. And I think that works really well, and it's a nice fresh skin for a game of this weighting. Setup and teardown time is a little bit on the higher side, especially setting it up and things. You've got a lot of different components here, a lot of different stacks of things, all the different tokens to get bonuses as you go up the track. Obviously, got the different card stacks and so on. So there is that to bear in mind, but it's nothing too onerous, just slightly higher than I would have ideally liked. Scalability as well is pretty damn good as well. The worker placement spots get slightly tighter at the bottom here depending on the player count. So for example, in a 2-player game, these spots here are taken up. But if it was a more open, say 4-player game, you still have to suffer a bit of a penalty in order to go the same place as somewhere else by paying an additional card or at least an additional symbol to go somewhere. So I do really like that. Comparison-wise, yes, this game has some really basic worker placement and some really basic deck building, but that's not actually a negative. Yes, they're pretty simple, but it doesn't feel like they are two isolated games put together. I like the way that simple idea of having to bear in mind the symbols on your cards with the worker placement. So yeah, you might want to play all your cards, but if you play all your cards, you won't be able to place your workers. So that's I think that's done really well, and it gives a kind of a fresh vibe to a lot of the standard Gateway Plus worker placement games. So overall, I was actually really pleasantly surprised with The Lost Ruins of Arnak. As I said in the intro, Gateway Plus games aren't usually something that I'm interested in, and my expectations were, to be honest, quite low for this one. Not in a bad way, but simply because of personal taste. But after the game was done, particularly in about halfway through the game, I really started to kind of enjoy the game. The resource management is strong. The deck building isn't tremendously strong, but it does feel like when you draw things, it feels like you are really getting something going. And by that 4th and 5th round, you are pretty much drawing through your whole deck and playing all your cards and using all these different helpers to give you extra abilities, knowing when to sacrifice the points on the board to get those extra things, and knowing when to pay off to go up the track as far as you want. I really did like it, and I can certainly see why this was so highly revered as a 2020 release. Now, recently I've done a top 10 Gateway Plus games, and I hadn't played this one by then, but I think if I was to play this or made that list after I played this game, I'm confident this would have been on it. I would recommend this one strongly, and I would play this above a lot of worker placement games and a lot of deck building games. So I really do think there's going to be a huge crowd for this one, which is already proving to be true. And I can certainly objectively look at it and say, you know what, this is a rock solid game. It's a lot of fun. It's got a great theme. It looks brilliant. And I would happily play this one anytime. So that concludes my thoughts on the Lost Ruins of Arnak. This one gets my shield of quality. And as I said, I would happily play this one anytime. So I hope you've enjoyed this review. If you have, please hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos too. For everyone else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye.